Ever get that feeling like you're just scratching the surface of something? Like there's this whole other level of understanding just waiting to be, unlocked.
I know that feeling.
Today we're diving deep, really deep, into a data set that's just got layers upon layers of potential. We're talking about transport for London's unified API.
The data that powers those apps we all use,
Yeah.
telling you when the next bus is going to show up. But it's way more than just that.
Oh, way more. And that's where our guide comes in, this document, tflapi.txt. It's a bit, shall we say, dense, but that's why we're here, to break it all down.
Think of this document as a roadmap for developers. It shows you all the data TfL makes available and how to actually access it.
So we're going beyond just using a transportation app here. We're talking about understanding the nuts and bolts of how those apps even work.
Exactly. At the heart of it all is the API, that's Application Programming Interface. It's how your app actually talks to TfL's servers.
Okay, so for someone like me, not exactly a coding whiz, can you give me like a real-world example of this conversation in action?
Okay, so imagine you're a city planner, right? And you're really focused on pedestrian safety.
Important stuff.
This API gives you crazy granular data, like down to the second. How long a pedestrian crossing stays lit versus the timing of traffic flow at a specific intersection.
Whoa, that's hyper-local.
Right. And with that data, now you can pinpoint areas that need adjustment. Maybe that crosswalk timer needs to be longer during rush hour.
So we're talking about making those tiny tweaks that could actually make the city safer.
Exactly. That's the power of this API. Raw data transformed into actionable insights that can lead to real improvements for everyone.
Now, that's what I call a deep dive. So we're talking about way more than just like bus timetables here, right?
Right.
What kind of stuff, what kind of data can we actually find in this API?
It's kind of mind-blowing, actually. You've got real-time data feeds, historical records going way back. We're even talking hyper-local stuff like air quality readings from sensors near bus stops.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Give me an example. Like, what kind of insights could we get from, say, historical accident data?
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Imagine you could analyze like every single accident recorded in London's transport system. Years and years of data.
We're talking like spotting trends, identifying high-risk areas, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But then picture taking it a step further, combining that historical accident data with real-time feeds. Like, what if we layer in current weather conditions, or even if there's a massive event happening in the city, you could potentially, start to predict and maybe even prevent risks as they're developing. Whoa. Hold on. So we're talking about using data to anticipate accidents before they even happen. Exactly. And you mentioned trends earlier. Think about it. What if you analyze those accident patterns alongside all the infrastructure changes that have happened over time? Like, have those new bike lanes actually made things safer for cyclists? Or has a particular junction redesign actually reduced collisions? This data can give you those answers.
Okay, so that's huge for things like city planning, urban development. But let's say I'm not, building the next Sim City. What about data that's relevant to me, to my everyday life?
Well, how about this? The API gives you real-time info on electric vehicle charging stations.
You mean like knowing if a charger is actually available before I drive all the way there?
Exactly. Picture this. Your car, right? It's low on battery, but it basically knows where to go. It uses this data to plan its own pit stops, routing you to a charger along your route that's guaranteed to be available based on your, remaining battery life.
Okay, so we're not just talking convenience here. This is making electric car ownership way more practical.
Yeah. And it just goes to show how valuable this open data can be. When you use it creatively, it can impact our lives in ways we wouldn't expect, even just simple things.
Now that we've got a handle on all this data, let's get into the nitty-gritty. How is this API actually structured? Because I'll be honest, right now, tflapi.txt looks like a foreign language to me. Okay, so it sounds like we've got this like treasure map of data, right? But it's written in this whole other language. Can you translate a little for those of us who don't speak code?
Sure. It might help to think of the API as a really big, well-organized library. And that document we keep talking about, the tflapi.txt, that's like the card catalog. It tells you how everything is organized so you can find exactly what you need.
Okay, so instead of like Dewey Decimal, we've got what, binary code? Just kidding. But seriously, what's the system here? How's it all work?
It all comes down to something called paths. They're like addresses, in a way, that point to specific data sets within the API. So you might see something like accident stats year, and that would lead you to, you guessed it, accident statistics all grouped by year.
And those curly brackets, those are important, right? What are those all about?
Ah, good eye. Those are placeholders for what we call parameters. Think of them like filters for your data searches. So let's say you wanted accident data specifically from 2023, you'd plug 2023 into that path, right where the curly brackets
I
are.
see.
Or maybe you want to see data for a specific bike docking station. There's a parameter for that too.
So parameters let you really fine-tune things, zero in on exactly what you're looking for.
Exactly. It's like taking this massive data set and slicing and dicing it so it's meaningful to you.
Oh.
And the best part is, the API does all the heavy lifting. You just structure your request, and it sends you the data in a format your app can work with, like JSON or XML.
So even if I'm not out here building the next big app, even just understanding these basic concepts, the paths, the parameters, it's like having the keys to the castle.
Exactly. That opens up a whole new world of possibilities. Suddenly, you can start asking really targeted questions like, where are the busiest bus routes on weekends? How has the air quality changed near that big construction site downtown? The possibilities really are pretty much endless.
From city planners to app developers to just curious people who want to know more about their city, this API is pretty amazing.
It really is. It's about making the data that shapes our world more accessible so we can all learn from it, build with it, and hopefully make things a little bit better.
Absolutely. Well said. And for our listeners, if you're feeling inspired to dive in and do some exploring of your own, we've got links to TfL's API documentation over on our website. Be sure to let us know what you discover. That's it for this deep dive into the world of open data. Until next time, happy exploring.